You possess a profound conviction that the physical universe around you is real and that the people you speak to have rich inner lives. But across neuroscience, evolutionary biology, and theoretical physics, modern empirical data points toward a highly isolating conclusion. Your perceived reality is an entirely localized construct. This chart breaks down the two parameters of solipsism. Metaphysical solipsism states that the external world is a literal void. Nothing exists outside your singular mind. Epistemological solipsism is slightly narrower. It states that the external world might exist, but any knowledge of it is logically unprovable. You can only be certain of your own cognitions. Philosophy historically framed this as the problem of other minds. The defining feature of consciousness is qualia, the subjective, phenomenal feeling of an experience, like the specific sting of a burn or the redness of a rose. Because qualia are strictly infertile, they are entirely inaccessible to third-party observation. Even rigorous attempts to solve this via linguistics failed. Ludwig Wittgenstein argued through his private language formulation that the very ability to articulate doubt requires a pre-existing community of other minds to establish the rules of language. But proving that a community is required to invent language does not empirically prove that the community you currently perceive is actually conscious. Because no behavioral test or brain scan can verify that another being truly experiences subjective awareness, this epistemological gap remains absolute. It is this exact gap that modern science has begun to exploit, replacing philosophical doubt with mathematical probability. The modern successor to these early skeptical models is the brain in a vat scenario. If a disembodied brain is connected to a computer that perfectly simulates all sensory inputs, walking, eating, loving, the subject experiences a complete phenomenological reality without a single physical object actually existing. If it is logically possible to perceive a physical world that doesn't exist, we must ask if it is equally possible to perceive human beings who do not possess consciousness. Philosopher David Chalmers codified this as the philosophical zombie thought experiment. This matrix isolates physical behavior from subjective awareness. A philosophical zombie, or P-zombie, is an entity physically, chemically, and behaviorally indistinguishable from a human. It will recoil from a flame and state that it feels pain, but there is absolutely no subjective experience accompanying these actions. The machinery works perfectly, but the lights are off. Is an unconscious biological algorithm can write poetry, debate philosophy, and express deep emotional attachment purely through physical outputs, you cannot rely on any outward behavioral marker to verify the inner lives of your family, friends, or peers. Neurobiology confirms that the vast majority of human cognitive activity, including memory retrieval and complex motor action, is already executed entirely unconsciously. If the human brain is already operating largely in the dark, an entire universe populated entirely by biological P-zombies is a mathematically rigorous possibility. Your social perceptions offer zero proof of reality. Classical neuroscience viewed human perception as a bottom-up process where the eyes and ears passively feed real-world data into the brain. Contemporary brain mapping, heavily driven by theoretical neurobiologist Carl Friston, actively inverts this. Friston's predictive processing model shows the brain as an isolated inference engine locked inside the silent, pitch-black vault of the skull. It actively generates a top-down model of the world, predicting sensory data based on context and prior beliefs. As the animation shows, incoming sensory data from the eyes and ears does not build your reality. The data merely acts as an error correction mechanism. When the sensory signal mismatches the internal prediction, it creates a surprisal error. The brain acts as a self-organizing system striving to minimize Shannonian free energy, the mathematical quantification of this uncertainty and surprise. To minimize that uncertainty, the brain literally hallucinates a predictable world. Researchers classify everyday healthy perception strictly as a controlled hallucination. When applied to social interaction, the people you speak to are localized neural simulations. The avatars of others are constructed entirely by your own visual cortex and theory of mind networks. Under this neurological framework, you have never interacted directly with another conscious entity. You interact solely with your brain's self-generated avatars of those entities, rendered in the theater of your mind, specifically to minimize thermodynamic surprise. If the people around us are self-generated avatars, why is the human brain so aggressively hardwired to feel profound empathy for them? Evolutionary biology provides a mechanistic answer through the Machiavellian intelligence hypothesis. To navigate incredibly complex, competitive hominin hierarchies, humans evolved theory of mind, specialized neurological machinery that automatically simulates the internal beliefs and intentions of autonomous competitors. From a strict metabolic standpoint, your brain does not need the competitor to actually possess consciousness. It only needs to model them as conscious in order to accurately predict their next move. Cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman's interface theory of perception visualizes reality as a computer monitor. The complex, invisible array of electrical charges in the hardware is completely hidden from you. Instead, you are given a simple desktop interface with actionable symbols, like a blue folder icon. This graph plots the survival rates of different perceptual strategies over millions of simulated generations. The fitness beats truth theorem proves mathematically that organisms expending metabolic energy to see objective reality are driven to swift extinction. They are entirely outcompeted by simpler organisms using a low-resolution fitness-only hack that strictly identifies reproductive resources and lethal threats. Under this mathematical theorem, space-time itself is our biological desktop, and three-dimensional physical objects, including other biological bodies, are merely the icons. The intense emotional conviction you feel regarding the consciousness of others is not empirical evidence of their inner lives. It is a cognitive illusion, a biological user interface installed by millions of years of natural selection to keep your specific organism alive. If biology proves we evolved to ignore objective reality, fundamental physics questions whether objective reality exists at all without a central observer. The Wigner's friend paradox models a split reality. Inside the laboratory, a conscious observer measures a quantum system, forcing the wave function to collapse into a definitive physical state. But outside the laboratory, physicist Eugene Wigner has not yet made an observation. According to quantum mechanics, from Wigner's perspective, the entire laboratory, including his conscious friend, remains in a blurred state of quantum superposition. Two different observers possess mathematically correct, yet entirely contradictory descriptions of the exact same reality depending on their reference frame. The physics cannot maintain a single observer-independent fact. The interpretation that explicitly resolves this is quantum Bayesianism, or cubism. It states that the wave function does not describe an objective physical reality. It is strictly a mathematical tool used by an agent to calculate their personal, subjective degree of belief regarding a measurement. Measurement outcomes are entirely private, subjective events. Physicist John Archibald Wheeler expanded this into the participatory universe hypothesis, demonstrating through delayed choice experiments that a present act of observation literally determines the physical state of a particle in the past. The universe does not sit statically waiting to be perceived. At the quantum level, the fabric of reality is entirely egocentric. The subjective observer acts as the central locus of creation, rendering the existence of independent, objective peers physically inaccessible. Zooming out to the absolute macro level of cosmological thermodynamics, we encounter the second law. The entropy, or measure of disorder in a closed system, always increases over time. The highly ordered state of our current universe is a massive statistical anomaly. In the late 19th century, Ludwig Boltzmann proposed that the universe is overwhelmingly in a state of chaotic thermal equilibrium. However, over an infinite span of time, random quantum fluctuations will occasionally cause particles to spontaneously arrange in highly ordered structures. Astronomer Arthur Eddington noted the catastrophic mathematical flaw in this logic. Smaller fluctuations of order are exponentially more probable to occur than massive ones. This logarithmic curve highlights the core of the Boltzmann Brain paradox. The time and energy required to spontaneously generate a 93 billion light-year wide universe containing trillions of galaxies is almost infinitely larger than the energy required to spontaneously assemble a single, fully functioning human brain out of the void. Because eternity provides infinite chances, this specific localized entity, the Boltzmann brain, would pop into existence for a fraction of a second. It would arrive complete with perfectly fabricated memories of a childhood and the immediate sensory hallucination of watching a video, before instantly dissolving back into thermal chaos. Spontaneously generated minds outnumber biologically evolved minds by an unfathomable margin. Probabilistically speaking, under standard classical physics, you are almost certainly a transient fluctuation hallucinating a cosmos, not an evolved being with a genuine past. The absolute certainty we feel regarding an objective reality populated by conscious peers is heavily reliant on our neurochemistry. When that chemistry falters, the reality of the other is severed immediately. Clinical evidence for this is found in delusional misidentification syndromes, specifically Capgras delusion. A patient with Capgras recognizes their loved ones visually, but feels no emotional connection to them. To resolve this cognitive dissonance, the brain concludes the family member has been replaced by an identical, soulless imposter. This cross-section highlights the specific neurological failure mechanism at play. Capgras is caused by a physical disconnection between the visual cortex, which handles facial recognition, and the amygdala, which handles emotional response. Capgras syndrome acts as a localized, empirical form of solipsism. The brain simply ceases to generate the theory of mind feeling regarding a specific person, instantly rendering them a biological automaton. Our connection to humanity relies entirely on the precarious firing of the temporal cortex. If you reject the premise that you are a thermodynamic anomaly, the remaining mathematical probabilities offer equally isolating realities. Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom's simulation trilemma uses computing power limits to argue that any conscious observer is almost certainly a line of code in an artificial construct. To save rendering bandwidth, a hyper-advanced architecture would likely only render your internal consciousness, populating the rest of the world with non-player characters governed by behavioral algorithms. Alternatively, computer scientist Bernardo Kastrup's framework of analytic idealism posits there is only one ontological primitive, a single universal consciousness. Under this model, biological organisms are simply dissociated alters of this single mind, trapped in a cosmic identity disorder. The people around you are not separate entities. They are fragmented facets of the exact same underlying consciousness looking back at itself. From the epistemological void of philosophical zombies to brain models predicting reality from the inside out, from evolutionary interfaces stripping away objective truth to the egocentric mechanics of quantum probability, the synthesis of multidisciplinary science points to a startling convergence. The concept of billions of independent, conscious minds sharing an objective physical universe is the least mathematically and empirically supported model of existence. Behind the evolutionary interface designed to keep you alive, the conscious subject remains intimately and inescapably alone.